back in 2013, I don't know if you remember, in Colorado, we had a massive flood, broke all the dams in the mountains, and water rushed down. I had 5 feet of water. Like I prayed into it, and I was just like, well, if it's gone, it's gone. But there's no way my angels are going to like let that get destroyed. And it was unreal. And it didn't surprise me. Like, that's the crazy thing. Like, I knew it was protected.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide. And we see God, we see his hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. So we have these great stories: angel encounters, divine interventions, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I am your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. So glad you're here for this one. Floods. Well, we talk about as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. So certainly we read about a big flood in the Old Testament there. Still have floods. This one was Colorado, 2013. Rain, man, it was pouring down the Rockies. Biblical proportions, the Weather Service said. This kind of flooding happens every 500 to 1,000 years. And here's Jennifer. She's in her home upstairs because downstairs there's 5 feet of water flowing through her house, and then her car's floating away and all.
Stranded and submerged. The Colorado landscape washing away as rescuers race to those trapped by rising waters.
It's like the ocean out here.
So she's got things to think about and worry about, and yet there's one prayer that she has up there. There's just one item downstairs under 5 feet of water that she really wants. You know that thing when they talk about, if there was a fire in your home, what's the one thing of sentimental value that you would grab? Beyond people, just the one thing you would want to grab before you headed out the door. She's got that one thing in her mind, and she's praying to God. She's asking her angel for that one thing. If that could just be saved, that one thing. What's yours? Is there a one thing, Well, it's interesting. As I'm talking to Jennifer, I'm totally oblivious, and I'm talking to her on Super Bowl Sunday after the game. It's late. I'm oblivious to the fact that in 8 days, as we post this episode, first reading, for any Catholic who happens to go to Mass, the first reading that you're going to be hearing is about Noah. Interesting. This is a flood story.
This past week in particular has been an odd week. I was listening to your podcast at work this week, and I was actually told my manager about this happening several times over the weekend. I was writing an email to someone named James, and I was starting off, I hope this email finds you well. That's what I always say in the beginning of all my emails. And as I was writing that, you said those exact words, like, I hope you are well. As I was writing, I hope this email will find you well. And then that person you were talking to was either named or referred to somebody named James. Like, as soon as I looked at the name, was proofreading the entire email that I wrote. And I said to my manager, I was like, well, it just happened again. Oh, it just happened again.
So here we were on Super Bowl night. Remember the overtime game, KC in San Francisco. So it's a little later for this interview, and I find out something shocking about Jennifer. You've never watched a football game.
I've never sat and watched a game. I don't know the rules. I'd never went to a game in high school. Football was just never my thing.
May I ask your age to find out how long this record has been intact?
I'll be 47 in April.
47 years of never. That's something to be proud of.
Is it? I've never played Monopoly either, so there's 2.
There you go. Has never watched a football game or played Monopoly. And if you check Genesis right here, Noah also never watched a football game or played Monopoly. It's right there.
And in terms of personal faith, I have prayed ever since I could remember, and used to have my mom pray with me and cry before I would go to sleep because I would get so moved by prayer. And, I was like a little girl. And
can you explain the crying thing as a kid during prayer? Why?
I would have her say that prayer, the now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep if I should die before I wake. And when I get to that point, tears would just start streaming out of my eyes. And they're about to now.
Well, there is kind of that, what the heck? We're talking about death to a kid. That's,
I know, it's kind of intense.
Yeah, it's very intense.
I would now and again, I'd ask my mom to pray it with me, and she would be like, "Are you sure you want to do this?"
This usually doesn't go well, daughter. You know.
I know.
Prayer, yeah. I mentioned how songs bubble up in my head seemingly out of nowhere, but we know where that nowhere is right now. I'm thinking, what's the title of this one? Even though the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may tumble, they're just made out of clay. Our love is here to stay. God talking to us. All of this is going away. The earth is going away. Rockies is going away. Ocean's going away. But the love of God for us, eternity with God, the eternal God, and we as eternal beings with God in that love, that stays. We outlive the planets. We outlive the stars. We outlive everything. Matthew 24, this world will pass away, but my word will never pass away.
Dozens of homes, entire neighborhoods up to their roofs in that murky runoff. In Estes Park, this dramatic video of a woman desperately holding on as rescue workers zipline her to safety. And from inside this fire truck, the floodwaters bubbling over the windshield.
Flooded an insane amount of area and homes and everything else. I had 5 feet of water go through my house. My car floated away. I lost a ton of stuff that I own. And so once the waters subsided, my room was upstairs, but I had a bunch of stuff down in storage on ground level. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like all my childhood Christmas decorations and my Christmas stocking that my mom made for me when she was pregnant is downstairs. It's under those floodwaters. And I was just praying, and I just like, please don't let me lose that Christmas stocking. And it's a white Christmas stocking, and it has little panda bears crawling up like candy canes. And I prayed into it. I thought about it, and then I just like let it go because nothing I could do. There's 5 feet of water. And that was the first thing when the floodwaters subsided is, I went, and it was disgusting. This like filthy muck, like molded dog food plastered on the walls. I mean, I have pictures. It's gross. And I found that box, the Christmas box, and it was saturated cardboard, which is peeled off. And it was just this mud ball of like grass and debris and ruined Christmas decorations. And I literally cracked that mud ball open like an egg, and inside, perfectly clean, not a drop of mud on it, is my Christmas stocking, which I still have tucked away safely to this day. That was the only decoration that was saved out of all of my childhood decorations.
Wow, that's beautiful, isn't it?
Isn't it great?
That's a prayer answered. You said it, you let it go, and there it is.
And there it is. It's white. It didn't have any mud on it. It doesn't have a stain on it. And it was unreal. And it didn't surprise me. Like, that's the crazy thing. Like, I knew it was protected, and it was like, I prayed into it, and I was just like, well, if it's gone, it's gone. But there's no way my angels are going to like let that get destroyed, and there was like I just wanted, like, that Christmas stocking was it is still so precious to me. And so I was so happy about that.
Something so simple, but of such huge value.
Christmas stocking that my mom made for me when she was pregnant.
Christmas, Christ, Jesus is there in this love of a mother for her daughter in the womb. That's what's saved from the floodwaters. Let's pause right about here. Then more here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. Quick Patreon shout out. Thank you, Cecilia. You're breaking my heart. Paul Simon. Cecilia Lowe. Cecilia Lowe, thank you so much for keeping this all going. And by the way, I want to get a comment here just to let you know, Jennifer, you're not the only one. In fact, we do this on purpose. I can actually read listeners' minds. I did this with Amy Asif, and Amy.
Oh, well, I wanted to tell you. Oh my gosh, so this was so funny on Sunday. I was driving to Mass. You were. I think you were interviewing a couple of people. You had compiled a couple of guests into one show, and so for one of them, I'm in the car and I'm driving and I sneezed, and immediately after you said, "God bless you." And I said, "Oh, thank you." Like, it was like you were right there.
See, there you go. Thank you, Amy. But Amy, someone else who helps us out on Patreon.
I'm just amazed at your reach. I'm amazed at how many people you've been able to influence and talk to and give them a platform to tell their story, especially the ones who are like, well, I've never told anyone this before.
Yeah, I know. I love
And
those.
I really am amazed at your Australian following. I mean, that is
What?
crazy
What?
to me.
That's nuts, isn't it?
I know. But I'm always blown away that there are so many people out there that have had these amazing experiences, and every story brings me a message from God, I think. And every story gives me something to think about. And so even if it's not my story, it kind of is my story, inspired in some way to be a better Christian, to seek God a little bit more closely. And that's what I love about it. And that's why I want to support it.
Thank you, Amy. Patreon.com, search for Trapper Jack, or just come here to this episode, 301, touchedbyheaven.net, and click your way through. All right, let's get back now to Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. We like to say around here that, and it's true, that everything we read about in the Bible is still happening today. And again, I look at the Sunday readings of February 18th, and I see the flood, and I see the sins have been washed away. Where does it say that? Well, in the second reading on this day, there's 1 Peter, and Peter referring to the prefigurement, that the flood was prefigurement for baptism, a washing away of the sins and beginning again anew, pure, and all that. And the third reading today in the gospel is Jesus going out in the desert right after the baptism in the Jordan, and he's out in the desert, and Mark says that he was tempted by the devil, but he also says he was ministered to by angels. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, wasn't there an episode about baptism and angels? And somebody had just been baptized. Yeah. And I found it. It was Cindy, and it's episode 113, not floods, snow and ice, and ministered to by angels.
So we had a really tough snowstorm, and this was like the beginning of March, and the snow had melted. I figured, well, I'll go down there just for a little while before everybody gets up. Didn't tell anybody where I was going, which was a mistake. It's a waterfall, and I go there once in a while just to relax and, like I said, to be with nature and kind of connect with God. It's a peaceful place for me. So I drive down there, and it's a little road here in town, and I pull off, and I had brought my hiking boots with me. I brought a winter jacket, and I brought some mittens. But I left my mittens, I left my cell phone and my inhaler for my asthma in my car. I go down to the path into the woods where the waterfall is. And I start walking, and I realize the snow hadn't really melted in the woods because it didn't hit the sun. And I realized that it was deep. So I started walking, and I started slipping and sliding. And I started falling, my camera went flying, I went flying, went down the hill to the bottom where the waterfall was. And I thought, geez, I looked back up the hill. I'm like, there's no way I'm getting back up that hill. It's too icy. Every time I tried to stand up, I kept falling down, and my hands started bleeding because I had hurt myself. I had no mittens on, my hands were freezing. Here I am at the bottom of this hill with no cell phone, nobody around to get help. My inhaler was in the car, and I was starting to feel like my asthma was coming, was getting out of hand. So I kept trying to get up, and finally I look up the hill, and I see this older man, walking down the path I just came down. And I'm looking at him, and he was, an older man. He was a white-haired man, thin. He was wearing a thin blue jogging suit and white tennis sneakers. And I'm looking at him, and I'm trying to stand up, and he's walking down this hill that I literally just slid down. And he walks down gracefully, and he smiles at me, and he says, "Slippery, isn't it?" And he keeps walking past me, and I'm looking at him with my mouth open, thinking, how in the world did he make it down here in tennis shoes? I have my hiking boots on, and I can't even stand up. So I see him walk over to the waterfall, and he just stands there peacefully looking at the waterfall. And I turned around, and I said, well, if he walked down there, I can walk back up. So as soon as he walked past me, I was able to stand up, get my bearings, get my footing, and walk back up the hill.
Did you try to put your feet in his footsteps or anything like that?
Exactly.
You did.
Yes, I
That's what
figured.
you did.
Yes, exactly.
And not in
To
the
go-
same place you were trying to go up before.
Correct. Maybe a couple of feet from where I was walking. Got up there, I realized that there was no car there. He had come from nowhere. There was nobody around. It's the middle of nowhere. And he had come from absolutely nowhere. And I look back down and I see him just standing looking out over the waterfall by himself, just happy as a clam. And I think, my goodness, thank goodness he came along, because I could have been stuck down there without a cell phone, without help if I really needed it. But there was something about him that when he walked by, I was able to get up and walk back up that hill.
Smiles at you. He obviously wasn't dressed for the occasion either.
No, absolutely not. I was just shocked that he was by himself. There was no vehicle in anywhere to be seen.
And he didn't say, obviously he sees that you're in trouble. He can see that, can he?
Yes, because I was bleeding. I was a mess.
And he doesn't acknowledge that, just slippery, isn't it?
Yes. And it didn't look to him. I mean, the way he walked down, it certainly did not look like it was slippery to him.
Slippery, ain't it? Yeah, uh-huh.
Yes. And you know how you just kind of look at somebody with your mouth open thinking, what in the world is going on?
And then you went back up the same, and while he's there looking at the waterfall.
Exactly. And I look back thinking, gosh, is he okay? Oh, he looked absolutely fine. Me, I was cut up, I was bruised, I was battered, and everything else. So I call him my little angel in blue.
You know, it's funny, and I've had a few of these occasions where people will be in this situation, and to the casual outside observer, it would seem that the person, in your case, you, would say, man, I tell you, here's what happened. And you felt no calling to have the conversation.
Exactly. Got up the top of the hill and I got to my car. I'm like, what in the world just happened? That is so bizarre.
Wow. That's pretty good.
Yes.
That's pretty good. How soon after being baptized all this happened?
It started unraveling maybe 3 or 4 months later.
Do you feel a connection? Do you feel a connection with the baptism in this?
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me why.
Absolutely.
Tell me why.
Not only that, but just things that happened afterwards. It definitely felt like I had a connection more back to God that helped me through so much that happened after all of that, the baptism. I felt a deeper connection. I felt like I could speak to him in my heart, and I knew that everything was going to be okay.
Yeah.
That he had this, he was going to take care of it, he was going to help me get through it. And I just had to have the faith to do that.
Yeah. Well, God bless. That's awesome. Okay. That's an angel. That's an angel to me. I don't know what else that is, man. That's just.
So it wasn't far after that I had been having some issues, like I said, with asthma. I had a heart murmur, I had AFib, I had all these different things going on. And I'd been seeing all kinds of specialists. And I just decided to go to my regular doctor one day, and she started listening to my neck, as they do with the stethoscope. And she said, I hear something. And I said, well, yeah. I said, I've been hearing this whooshing noise in my ear for quite some time now.
There was a lot of bouncing around on what the issues here were with the heart, with the lungs, with the blood vessels, with the artery, until ultimately
they actually did some more testing and suspected that it was actually pulmonary artery sarcoma, which is cancerous. But they needed me to do chemotherapy to shrink this growth before I had a second surgery to replace the artery. And so they put me on some really intensive chemotherapy. And during this time, I was by myself one day, and I walked out to get the mail, and I opened up my mailbox, and there's this brown envelope in my mailbox addressed to me without a return address. And I opened up the package, and it was a book called Meditation for Your Health. And I looked up and down my street, like it looked like somebody had just left it in my mailbox. And I'm we live kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I'm looking up and down the street thinking, what in the world is this? There's no note, there's no card. It looked like an older book, like somebody actually had used it. And I had called all my friends and I thought, well, maybe they sent it to me or something. And nobody said that they had sent it to me. So I was confused as to what it was about. And I started reading it, and they have a number of different stories and mantras in there that help you to relax when you're trying to heal. And one of them was the Hail Mary. And like I said, I was raised Protestant, and I didn't know a lot about that, to be honest with you. But I started doing that early in the morning and reading that when I got up. I would sit in a quiet place and I would read it, and it would calm me down. And I would go through my day, try to remember what the Hail Mary was, and do it in my mind when I was feeling myself becoming anxious, and it would calm me down. Or if I was having a CAT scan and I was starting to get anxious, I would run that through my mind, and it would calm me down. And I still have the book. I still read it. I still look at it.
It's interesting. Is it mostly a book that isn't Christian? It didn't sound like when you said mantras and things like that. Is it
correct?
And in this thing is just a Hail Mary is plopped in there too?
I was surprised as you were, because I'm thinking but it just struck me as, this is peaceful, it's beautiful, and this is what I needed to be able to calm myself down.
Yeah, it's scripture. It's right out of Luke. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yes, it really is. And it made a big difference in my recovery. I know one of the doctors asked me if I was a spiritual woman, and I said yes. And he said, well, I find that spiritual people do much better in their healing.
Yeah. What does that tell you?
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's true. No, that shows up again and again.
So I don't know, maybe a couple of months ago, I had fallen asleep and I had this dream that I was in this attic, and it was just an A-framed attic, and it was all white. I was dressed in white, and I was sitting cross-legged on the floor. And I look up, and Jesus walks in, and he's dressed in white also. And he sits down cross-legged on the floor directly across from me, and he looks at me. He says, Cindy, what have you learned? And I looked at Jesus and I said, I have learned to keep my faith. I said, I have learned that I am stronger than I could ever possibly imagine that I could ever possibly be. And I've learned to find my voice. And that was the end of the dream. But it felt so powerful to me after everything that I've had to go through with this whole thing. I've had a number of people say, geez, you didn't blame God for everything that you've been through, or, and I said, honestly, that never crossed my mind. No, I've said that this has actually helped, and I've been able to help other people dealing with this now that felt like they're the only person on the planet that was dealing with these rare diseases. And I found out that we're not. And it's been kind of a blessing, to be honest.
If you get into dream analysis too, different parts of the house mean different things. If you go to the basement, it's kind of your foundation. It's kind of the foundation of what you are. Where you were obviously is more on the spiritual realm, the attic, the fact that everything's in white, heavenly, here's Jesus in white. So that kind of, that makes sense too, spiritual realm, heavenly realm.
And it was absolutely uncluttered in there. It wasn't a cluttered attic. So
Not
so
like the rest of us. Not like the rest of us. Yeah. Okay.
Not like my real house. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's nice.
And we walked into one store, and there was a Christmas book there. And I picked up this book, and something about it just looked really pretty, and I wanted to look at it. I opened up the book in the middle of it, and I just looked down, and there was this one page in the middle of the book, and it said, "You have been saved." And it just struck me. And I looked around, and I'm thinking, does anybody see this? This is amazing.
What else was on the page?
Nothing. That was all it said. You have been saved.
One line on that page. That was it.
Yes.
What else was in this book?
honestly, I was so flabbergasted.
It didn't matter. It's like, that's all I needed to see. All right, put it back. All right.
Exactly. It's exactly right. That's all I needed to see. I'm like, okay,
That was a beautiful little touch by heaven collision there. That's beautiful.
absolutely. And like I said, I looked around thinking, is anybody seeing this, or is this just me?
Got the only copy like that. I don't know.
Right? Maybe. And it just struck me that, wow, they really are helping me. They
Look
really
at.
are.
I mean, you look at, whether it's, you got your baptism, then you have an angel. You go up the rung. You got your baptism, you got your angel, you got Mary, you got Jesus, and oh, by the way, you've been saved. I mean, gee,
Right?
not bad. Not bad for 5 years of work. Not bad.
That's it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you for this, Cindy. This has been great.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I really enjoy hearing the positive messages with everything going on in the world right now. It's nice to hear something positive.
Thanks, Cindy. And if you look at baptism as being the door opening to these encounters, to find yourself at the bottom of a hill, no matter where you find yourself, no matter how impossible things seem to be, follow Christ. Put your feet right into his footprints. And I didn't notice the struggle. I didn't hear her talking about any struggle. It was easier than she thought. So no matter where we find ourselves, no matter how far we've slipped, no matter how cut up and bruised we are, the answer is Jesus, And yes, he does have angels, of course. What was the next one? Oh, the Hail Mary. I saw that as just kind of a, hey, you know what? You ought to get to know my mom. She was great raising me. She's still great as she brings people to me. That's just kind of a, hey, you know about mom? I get to know mom. That's what I see that as. The dream with Jesus. I think this is something we forget about the conversation with Jesus that we should be having every day. He always wants to know how we're doing. How you doing today? How are we doing today? How are you and I doing today? What's your faith struggle today? I think he's always sitting down in front of us, cross-legged, and just saying, how you doing? I'm here to help you. I think that is always there. I was just listening today to somebody saying how what they do, sometimes when we sit down in prayer, we're not sure what to do. So what he's doing now, what's effective for him, is that's his journaling time, because he finds that that's, as he's writing, he's in a sense, you're almost writing to Jesus. Here's what I'm going through. Here's what's going on. And so he finds journaling a wonderful way to pray, because within the journaling is prayer. Prayer is in the journaling, and he finds himself going deeper with, where am I today with Christ and my faith? And what do I want to do today? And what's been on my mind? So in writing it out, it helps him in his prayer life. I thought that was a great way of maybe adding that to our prayer. But he's always sitting there saying, how you doing? And then finally, you have been saved. I love that. You just kind of a reassurance that, by the way, this journey you've been on, yeah, we're good. You have been saved. Keep coming. You have been saved. Because after all, the name Jesus, what does the name Jesus mean? It means God saves. Yeah. Good choice, Jesus. Good choice of names, really. God saves. It's his identity, God, and it's his mission. Saves, And actually, when it comes to baptism, who does the best job? The best job of explaining the importance of baptism? God. He has, in the Bible, are you familiar with typology? I've just so fallen in love with typology. It's the breadcrumbs. It's how the stories are linked together. It's God is telling us through these historical events the important stuff. For example, and St. Peter used it so often in talking about baptism. Typology, linking the Old Testament. The Old Testament is revealed in the New, the Old, and you kind of slap your forehead and go, oh, I get it now, right? For example, St. Peter, when he would talk about baptism, he would say, yes, you are saved through the waters of baptism, and then he would link it to another time. Noah, right? Death is in the water. Where's the only place for salvation? In the boat. And then you introduce the dove. It's just so brilliant. Good job, God, to give us the dove, a little precursor of the Holy Spirit, So through typology, we see that Noah and the ark, a type of baptism. And then you get through the Red Sea. And again, same thing, death in the water with the Egyptian army. You see the symbolism of the enslavement of sin, with the Egyptians and getting away from Egypt and all that. So, but by the time you get to Jesus, when you get to Jesus, everything in the New Testament, it's a do-over. It's a reboot. It's an upgrade. 2.0 is on the way. It's this 10.0, 100.0, whatever you want to call it. Because with Jesus, we get everything. The washing away of original sin, the sin of Adam and Eve, the washing away of every sin we've ever committed. You get God himself saying to you at baptism, to your children at baptism, this is my beloved son, or this is my beloved daughter. And then the heavens are torn open, and here comes the Holy Spirit. You're part of the family now. You belong. Get in the boat. Everybody in the boat. So when someone says to me, well, I'm going to wait till my son or daughter makes that decision for themselves, it's like, am I going to do that? Would I do that? No more than I would wait for them to decide whether or not they want to go to school, or decide that they want to go to the doctor, or decide that they want to eat the strained carrots, or decide that they want to wear clothing or not. As a parent, I want to do what is good for my child. And just seeing everything here that we've talked about, this is good. This is the Holy Spirit. This is God. This is being in the family. This is defense against the evil one. This is putting somebody on the strongest path possible. The power of baptism, you bet. That is just reassuring and comforting for all of us. Thank you so much for your story, Cindy. Need your story? Please let me know. What's your encounter story? Get a hold of me at touchedbyheaven.net. Thank you. See you next week on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack. And Jennifer, you want to lead us in a closing prayer?
I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake.